This is step 6, the presentation of the entire project by Shrina, Candice, Aubriana, Sheena, and Caitlin. We'll start out with the PICO worksheet. Originally, we were looking at this patient population of school-aged children with autism with the intervention of the use of American Sign Language in comparison to Picture Exchange Communication System. The outcome was requesting objects. The initial research question we had was, how does the use of American Sign Language improve requesting skills in school-aged children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder in comparison to the Picture Exchange Communication System as measured by the number of spontaneous requests made? Below are some inclusion and exclusion criteria listed. Our refined research question is as followed. Will a visual PECS board placed on a student's desk increase spontaneous requests for nonverbal students with autism? Implementing PECS as a communication device has led to increased functional communication skills for children with autism. The results of these studies are consistent with previous research that found that PECS increased participants' level of independent and spontaneous manding. Therefore, we have chosen to further study the effects of PECS on nonverbal preschool children with low-functioning autism. The outcome and importance. The desired outcome is that the frequency of spontaneous manding will increase with the use of the PECS board. Data will be collected based on 3 different requests: requesting food or beverages, requesting items for vocational tasks, such as glue and crayons, and requesting to use the bathroom. By measuring 3 types of requests, teacher assistants will be able to have a sufficient number of instances for data collection 2 weeks prior to cycle 1 for baseline and during each cycle of treatment. Data will be measured using observation of behaviors when requesting food, beverages, and vocational items, whereas data measured for bathroom use will be measured by number of accidents in the classroom versus requests to use the bathroom. The importance of this study is to observe whether or not the use of PECS will make a significant change in the way that children communicate their wants or needs. It is essential that these children become capable of advocating for themselves by initiating communication and voicing their needs in the classroom setting appropriately. Ideally, this skill will be generalized outside of the classroom. Given immediate reinforcement using the various forms of PECS, it is expected that it will instill the functional, necessary role of communication. Topic and problem. My nonverbal students with autism have difficulty requesting basic wants and needs. Typically, these children will only request when asked a question directly or given a verbal prompt. Due to the lack of independent requesting, these students have a tendency to be hungry throughout the day due to not requesting snacks or juice, or will not go to the bathroom when they need to, resulting in accidents. As a result, the students appear uncomfortable or frustrated. This frustration carries over into their other classes and causes students to be distracted or uncooperative during lessons. Hypothesis and rationale. By providing a PECS board on my students' desks, the frequency of spontaneous requests will increase in the classroom. We investigate the use of PECS communication board to increase spontaneous requests within the classroom because it has been proven to increase functional communication skills in children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Subject selection and measurement considerations. The study will consist of nonverbal preschool-aged children from Heartshare Preschool in Queens, New York. It's a classroom of 7, 4 boys and 3 girls. Each student is considered low-functioning and nonverbal and is on the autism spectrum disorder. Students will not have had prior exposure to PECS before participating in this study. Some considerations. Since these students are brand new to using PECS, we expect a learning transition period to take place when initially implementing the PECS boards, in which little to no gains are recorded in frequency of spontaneous requests. Number of spontaneous requests will be measured. The requests that will be recorded are requesting food or beverages, requesting items for vocational tasks, and requesting to use the bathroom. The PECS board will consist of the core vocabulary being tracked for students, including bathroom, juice, snack, crayons, and glue. Initially, these students will be presented with a preferred object, such as a snack. When the students reach for the object, the student will be prompted to pick up the picture on the desk and give it to the teacher or teacher assistants. Verbal and tactile prompts will be used as needed. When the teacher receives a picture for the item, only then she will say, "Oh, you want a snack?" and give the child what was requested. As the students become more independent when requesting, the field of pictures on the desk will increase to include all of the core vocabulary being used. This way, the student will have to choose between which picture he or she is requesting. Some qualitative techniques. Teacher assistants will be primary personnel in charge of data collection during baseline and the treatment phases. At baseline, TAs will document any behaviors observed regarding requests that are not understood, such as frustration, crying, etc., and consequences/effects of the child not being able to convey requests. Interviews will be conducted to identify aforementioned behaviors displayed at home and to monitor the effect of treatment on these behaviors. Once treatment is introduced, the TAs will note any behaviors observed when requests are made. Post-treatment, additional caregiver interviews will be conducted as a follow-up to treatment. Rationale for qualitative techniques. Our reason for selecting a qualitative procedure over quantitative procedures as the primary method of data collection is because we are trying to obtain an understanding of the emotions associated with a child not being able to communicate. Also, based on our findings from the annotated bibliography, there is now a substantial amount of information available regarding the decrease in frustration that is characteristic to the target population. Caregiver interviews would be conducted in a structured formal interview format in order to obtain pertinent information related to the participants and utilize one set of questions. Some quantitative techniques. The teacher and 2 teacher assistants will collect data based on frequency of spontaneous requests made. Both teacher assistants will be assigned 4 students each to collect data on while the teacher conducts the lesson. Caregivers will be given a Likert scale regarding the child's communicative ability after being interviewed. Responses to each statement will correspond to a point value, such as strongly agree would equal 5, and so on. After obtaining data from baseline and post-intervention, it will be analyzed to determine the mean, standard deviation, and accompanying narrative regarding the findings. Using this method, the teacher researcher will be able to determine if skills have generalized outside the classroom post-treatment and caregiver perception prior to treatment using a negative or positive numerical value. The study will be broken down into 3 cycles. The first cycle is the PECS board on the desk. The second is PECS communication book in close proximity of the child. The third is a lanyard with PECS symbols. In the first cycle, data will be collected on the child's ability to communicate using the PECS communication board, which will be affixed to the child's desk. The children spend most of their time at their desk during school, and this board will be easily visible and accessible for communication. This method may not have the greatest potential for carryover, as the children will not always carry boards with them. In Cycle 2, data will be collected on the child's use of communication book. Since the children are not always at the desk, this option may be more feasible for carryover purposes. The communication book also has potential for vocabulary growth, as it can hold a greater quantity of PECS symbols. One downfall is that the book must always be in close proximity of the child for accurate data, and there is a possibility that the book will be misplaced. In the third cycle, data will be collected based on the child's use of the communication lanyard. This method has potential for carryover, as the parents can wear the lanyards at home. At school, there is always an adult in the classroom, therefore a lanyard will always be accessible to the child. This method may prove to be more effective than using a communication notebook, since teachers and TAs will not have to remember to carry the book with them from class to class, as they will put the lanyard on in the morning and leave it there for the remainder of the day. Of note, each of the 3 cycles will include parent training on the use of PECS. Data collection, when and how. The students will begin PECS training in October. During this time, each student will be trained in the concept of associating pictures with the tangible items they represent, which is a crucial skill for these children to possess. Training and data collection for each cycle will not be implemented until the child has mastered basic concepts of PECS. Cycle 1 will begin once a student has been trained in PECS. It is understood that some may complete their training prior to others. Those students who complete training early will begin the cycles prior to their classmates. Each cycle will be trained for no longer than 4 weeks, then observed for 4 weeks immediately after training. Ideally, training will take place for 4 weeks prior to data collection for each cycle. It is understood that some children learn faster than others. If a child completes training early, data collection on that child will begin early, but will still only be observed for a maximum of 4 weeks in the given cycle. This is to prevent skewed data. Data will be collected throughout the cycles and analyzed after each cycle's completion. Training for the next cycle will be implemented immediately after completion of data collection for the preceding cycle. Structured formal interviews with caregivers to gather opinions on the effect of the visual supports of the child's overall communication will also be gathered. TA observation note-taking in logbooks provided for each student. caregiver observation note-taking that will be used to monitor the student's progress at home. Caregivers will fill out a chart to log how many requests and nature of requests the child made in a single day. They will indicate if the requests were successful or not in the log sheet. The log sheets will be sent with the child back and forth each week, and data will be compiled at the end of each cycle from all of the log sheets to analyze the results and determine if the students have made progress. Structured interviews will be conducted with caregivers to gather opinions on the effect of the visual supports for their child. The teacher will take data when the TA is not available using the same methods as the TA. It's the TA's responsibility to make sure data is collected by the teacher or another TA on their assigned child if they are not in the room. This is the caregiver, teacher, and parent checklist to be used for each different request. It is to be taken home with the child daily and gathered at the end of the week. This is part of the caregiver interview. Some of the questions involve: does your child use PECS at home? Do you encourage them to use it? Are they using it independently, or do they need to be prompted? Do you see a difference in behavior after PECS? Are they less frustrated or upset when using PECS? How often do they use PECS? Are there any instances that you've noticed where your child uses PECS the most? And are there any topics of interest that are not included in the PECS book that you would find beneficial for your child? There's also a space for further remarks, concerns, and notes. What will be done with the data? Analysis to see how their overall participation and use of spontaneous requests has increased, comparing data pre-training and post-training. We will also analyze for which types of requests the PECS system was used the most. On an individual level, we will look at how each individual used their PECS system to increase requests. We will look at what times during the day they use it the most, the types of requests the child used it for the most, and to see if the children generalized the usage of the PECS boards into the environments outside of school using parent-provided data. Based on this information, we will be able to determine in which setting and under which circumstances the PECS board was most beneficial. We will be able to determine whether or not the usage of PECS significantly increased individual and overall class usage of spontaneous requests. Teacher, parent, and caregiver observer checklists will be compared to identify any recurring patterns or trends. The following data are the observer checklists for one child in each cycle. The observer name, which is Sheena, would be the teacher in this case. So this is for cycle 1. Are they using PECS? No. And it goes through the different questionnaires. Would be for cycle 2. You can see that different requests are being made. They are using PECS, and the child did request to use the bathroom. And for cycle 3. So for cycle 1, the data was collected for each child and for how many requests were made during the course of the week. So for week 1, child 1 made 2 requests to use the bathroom. This is all for cycle 1. So for cycle 2, we did the same thing, but this is more of a breakdown of each week. So each observer, such as the parent, teacher, and the teacher assistant, will have one data sheet to fill out for the week, which will be then composed into a data sheet such as this one. So this data was composed into this, and you can see where 3 bathroom requests, 1, 2, and 3, were then composed into 3 bathroom requests for child 1 in week 1. So this is the master chart that shows the increase in requests made in each cycle. So for cycle 1, for bathroom, it increased into cycle 2, and then increased even more until cycle 3. The same is true for the snacks and drinks, which increased to cycle 2 and increased to cycle 3. And the same is true for the vocational item requests, which only slightly increased from cycle 1 to cycle 2, but then significantly increased in cycle 3. Therefore, the greatest requests made were with the use of the PECS lanyard, which was cycle 3. And these are our references.